You've got the bond markets in a huge, mispricing to a certain extent, But when you look at it from that perspective, depending on your macro outlook, you could possibly envisage an environment where your 10-year US bond yields go down to 0.5%. So if that happens, you still got some upside when it comes to holding government bonds. So it depends on what your overall macro outlook is. But having said that, when you look at the S&P, the yield in the S&P 500, it does look attractive vis-a-vis your bond yields.
What do you think that this repricing is telling us? Because there are some out there in the market like Deutsche Bank, which when you look at the flattening of the yield curve in the States, it's pricing in us. Well, it's indicating that we've now got a 60% chance of a US recession. Others are saying it's completely repricing central bank thinking. What do you think that we're seeing in the bond space?
Well, basically, it's indicative that you're probably going to see a long period of very slow growth. The recession risk is definitely rising in the US. I think a lot hinges on what the jobs report comes out, like what the jobs report looks like tomorrow. But when you look at fundamentally, the US economy doesn't look that great, but you're still looking at about 2% kind of growth. So it does appear that people who are envisaging a recession might be jumping the gun a bit to a certain extent. So on that basis, we still like equities vis-a-vis bonds, but it's just that when you look at the US equity market, it still looks a bit expensive. Yeah, it still looks expensive.
And this is the problem, right?
Exactly. So the question here is how much money do you want to be putting into a market where it's 16-7 times kind of PE? No doubt that you're getting a bit of a kicker in terms of yield, but we don't want to be chasing the market too much when valuations are looking a bit stretched. That's why vis-a-vis, you look at the overall global environment, Asia does look a bit more attractive, Asia and EM, because valuations are a lot less stretched.
Asia EM, not Asia developed.
Yeah. And effectively, when you look at it from that perspective, everything really depends on what your dollar outlook is. Yeah. Because, despite Brexit and all that, a lot of the emerging market currencies have actually held up relatively well. So from that basis, we see a bit more value within the EM space rather than in developed markets.
In particular where? In which EM?
Well, depending on your macro outlook, we tend to want more domestic plays. So that would be countries like India, for example, Indonesia, which tend to be more, not so clued into the global economy. So you're talking about more domestic growth that is coming out from those countries. So a bit less correlated with the global economy.